Hey, can I show you something from page 223 of the new Liberal budget in Canada? Just a small mention, half a page. Introducing a bank recapitalization bail-in regime. All right, well, what on earth does that mean? Well, here, I'll read some more. To protect Canadian taxpayers in the unlikely event of a large bank failure, the government is proposing to implement a bail-in regime that would reinforce that bank shareholders and creditors are responsible for the bank's risks, not taxpayers. This would allow authorities to convert eligible long-term debt of a failing systemically important bank into common shares to recapitalize the bank and allow it to remain open and operating. Okay, again, what does that mean? Well, I'll tell you what it means. It means that if a bank starts to go wobbly in Canada and you have money in that bank, the bank can take your money to bail itself out. But that's the joke. See, it already has your money, so they call it a bail-in, not a bailout. That's banker humor. See, when you have your life savings or your kid's college fund or even last week's paycheck in the bank that you need to pay your rent, you are technically a creditor of the bank, as in they owe you that money. But what this Liberal budget item hidden away on page 223 says is that if the bank has trouble, they can just take your cash. Oh, they'll give you shares in their worthless bank instead. Yeah, try paying your rent with that. If you want to know what a bank bail-in looks like, look at Cyprus. About 3 years ago, Cypriot banks had made risky loans to Greece under pressure from the European Union, and of course those loans were bad, so the banks got into trouble. But the European Central Bank said they'd only help out Cyprus if the banks seized their own depositors' assets, as in the European Union said, rob your own people first, then we'll top it up. Now, at first the plan was just to take 10% of people's savings, but then when poor people protesters, they made a change. They wouldn't touch the first 100,000 euros that anyone had in the bank, but above that, the banks would simply seize 30, 40%, just take it. There was such a panic, such a run on the banks, the bank branches simply closed. ATMs were limited to just a few euros a day to people to let them buy food. It was a total meltdown, and none of it subject to warning or a vote or prior notice, let alone approval in an election. It was massive theft to bail out risk-taking bankers, or banksters, as they are sometimes called in cases like these. And that's now coming to Canada, changing the rules. So that if a Canadian bank, perhaps the most regulated industry in Canada, other than cigarettes, if a bank gets in trouble because millionaire bank vice presidents made risky choices, well, ordinary Canadians will be forced by the Liberals to bail out the banks. They'll just take your money. Now, I understand asking a bank to fix itself rather than relying on a bailout from taxpayers. I agree with that. So I agree with asking a bank to fix itself, asking the shareholders in the bank to bail out the bank makes sense. They're the owners of the bank. They invest in the bank. They accept the risk of the bank. I get it. But just plain old taking the money of people who deposit money in the bank's safe, just stealing that to keep the bank healthy? I mean, that would be like saying to a mechanic, if you get into financial trouble, just take that car you're working on and sell it if you need to. I mean, you've got the car right there, right? I understand that depositors in Canada above a certain level are not insured, but that's insurance against a bank's failure. That's not insurance against the bank itself seizing your money, let alone with the government's approval and encouragement. That is called stealing. It keeps the banksters strong by stealing from the people who bank there. Oh, one more wrinkle. Do you think that if a bank were in crisis in Canada, say, for example, if a bank had made a lot of loans to the oil and gas industry and then the Liberal government killed that industry, blocked pipelines, banned tanker ships, brought in a carbon tax. So if the Liberals themselves pushed a bank into a financial tailspin, do you really think that if a bank was about to fail and it was about to seize its clients' deposits, do you really think that rich, well-connected people wouldn't get their money out fast and first? Do you really think that Liberal insiders wouldn't get wind of this and move their cash while you and me and other poor schlubs were fleeced? Well, again, look to Cyprus. Here's a story from Reuters about how that happened. Quote, the two banks at the center of the crisis, Cyprus Popular Bank and Bank of Cyprus, which have units in London, which remained open throughout the week and placed no limits on withdrawals. Bank of Cyprus also owns 80% of Russia's Uniastrum Bank, which put no restrictions on withdrawals in Russia. while ordinary Cypriots queued at ATM machines to withdraw a few hundred euros. As credit card transactions stopped, other depositors used an array of techniques to access their money, unquote. Yeah, I'm shocked. So the big fish, the Russian oligarchs in Moscow or London, were taking out millions of their own money while ordinary Joes couldn't even use their bank cards. Do you really doubt that the corrupt Libranos wouldn't get their cash out first while you and I had our money seized? One last point. Imagine you're an ordinary Cypriot and one day the government announces they've taken 30% of your savings to bail out irresponsible banksters. And it was all approved by the muckety-mucks at the European Central Bank, and it's all done but the crying. Well, what would you do? Well, they did nothing. They had some protests, probably smashed up a Starbucks and a McDonald's, but that's about it. What did they do in the U.S.? They had banking crises there, too. Well, they didn't dare do a bail-in because Americans would revolt. They would literally revolt, probably with guns, Revolutionary War style. Do you doubt it? You'd have an armed posse show up at every bank. Not to rob the bank, but to stop the bank's robbery. No U.S. banker would even consider it. They're free down there, and they believe in property rights and guns. But what about us here in Canada? Do you really think that Justin Trudeau and his Marxist advisor, Gerald Butts, would hesitate for a moment to tax 10% of your wealth with the stroke of a pen and the click of a computer mouse to hand to a bank? Why? Would you stop them? You and what army? And the Liberals travel in the same circle as the banksters. They're all a cozy little oligopoly. There's only 5 big banks in Canada. It's a club. They're highly politically regulated and politically connected. They love this bail-in idea. And so do the Liberals. Do you? What do you think? Do you think the Royal Bank or TD or CIBC or Scotiabank or BMO should have the power to simply take your money and keep it and say, thanks for becoming a forced shareholder in our insolvent bank? You're such a good sport. You bailed us out of our risky loans. We made the mistake. You pay the price. We'll keep our $1 million banker bonuses and we'll keep your deposits. Thanks for being a chump. Do you think this should be allowed? I don't. I think this is outrageous. The people of Cyprus may have put up with it. They were fleeced by their own government, but also by the European Union. No warning. But what's our excuse? You have your warning now. Page 223 of the budget. If you don't speak out against this now, don't say you weren't warned. I've started an online petition. I want to collect literally 100,000 names of Canadians against the bail-in, really, against this deal between banksters and Liberal politicians. Will you sign my petition? It's simple. It says, hands off my money. Don't you dare allow banks to seize our deposits to pay off their risky loans. Click here to sign it, or visit handsoffmymoney.ca now. That's handsoffmymoney.ca. Thanks for watching. Click here to never miss a Rebel update. Want even more of The Rebel? Well, click here to become a premium member.